Bună seara sau bună ziua, mă bucur să fiu astăzi între dumneavoastră, să am ocazia să particip împreună cu Marius să moderăm această sesiune. Și aș vrea să încep dându-i cuvântul unui foarte bun prieten și invitat, care, vă spun sincer, are cred că toți îl cunoașteți, are o carte de vizită impresionantă. Da? Aș putea să enumăr doar câteva, fiindcă mi-ar lua poate mai mult timp decât ar avea nevoie dânsul să facă această prezentare. Printre care faptul că Ian Previn este consilier al centrului EPPT, Centrul de Servicii pentru Setul Internațional de Standarde pentru evaluarea performanțelor energetice a clădirilor. De asemenea, consilier pentru proiecte și standarde internaționale la ISO, Institutul Olandez de Cercetare a Construcțiilor, din anul 2010 în 2022. Da? Și așa aș putea să merg puțin mai departe și cu alte capacități și aptitudini pe care IAP le are și pe plan internațional. Fiind membru al grupului consultativ al președintelui CNLEC, da? Membru al grupului consultativ al președintelui CEN, membru al forumului sectorial CEN, de asemenea activează în RIBA, ASHRE și aș mai avea nevoie cam de mai numără. În această după-amiază, ea ne va prezenta exact cum este și cartea de vizită a dânsului, o lucrare care are un titlu la fel de lung, da? Și am să mă opresc doar la New Green Deal Renovation Rate și am să rog pe Iap să avea această prezentare. Iap, thank you very much for being here with us and you have the floor.
Thank you very much for these kind words and also for inviting me and giving me the opportunity to say a few words on the energy policy actions from the European Union. That's the drive to change the EPBD and also answer the question if this has an impact on our EPB standards as they are now and as they have to be revised. Yeah. Okay, it works. Thank you. Well, this I don't have to repeat. It was already said by the introduction. Additional to this presentation, I may refer to several videos, webinars, and case studies on EPB standards that are available at our EPB Center website. So please go there if you want to see them. Well, this is the question. This policy, Green Deal, Fit for 55 by 2030, renovation rate, repower EU plan for May this year. They drive the current EPBD, so the Energy Performance of Buildings Directive revision that is ongoing this year. We expect that the new EPBD will be published at the beginning of next year. It's always a big challenge for Europe to revise this directive. They have to consult the Parliament, and the Commission prepares it, and then the European Council of our presidents around Europe, they also have an opinion, and in this three-angle, they have to find a solution, and I hope that it is by the end of this year. Next question is, does it affect our standards, and do we need to revisit them? Well, first I will say a few words about all these policies. Well, buildings are acknowledged as one of the key focuses in the Green Deal, and more specific, of course, in the renovation wave strategy. The ambition is to double the annual renovations of European buildings, and with a focus on deep renovation. The current renovation rate in average is about 1.5%. So they want to have 3%. Imagine in Romania to renovate 3% of your current building stock. Basis for the urgent revision of EPBD. Also to direct the national renovation strategy to achieve a decarbonized building stock by 2050. In the renovation waves, there are three focus areas: tackling the energy poverty of worst performing buildings, not only to make them more energy efficient and low carbon, but also to make them also more healthy. And neat examples for your government, priority for the renovation of public buildings as showcases for our industry. And then decarbonization, of course, of the energy delivered to and exported from buildings. To accomplish this, the Commission promotes minimum energy performance standards, which are actually requirements that can be and should be set by member states itself. So the numbers are up to the member states, and they should achieve at least cost optimal levels. So, and the requirement shall take into account also indoor climate conditions to avoid possible negative effects on like inadequate ventilation and so on. And the use of the energy performance certificate, additional to that, the building renovation passport is stimulated in the proposal. Five is push once, and that's. Can you change the slides? So I say next. I think that works better. About the Green Deal and the carbon climate neutral by 2050. We know, of course, the building is not just an energy consumer, but also a producer. So we have to optimize the building systems and envelope, decarbonize the energy carrier, and on-site renewable energy production, and interaction with the grid, which is essential. It means that we need an hourly approach. We need to consider storages, and the smart readiness indicator becomes more operational. It will be step by step towards zero carbon. Carbon, of course, CO2, as said before, it is carbon equivalence. We have to show the impact of our components in the energy chain. You don't evaluate the product as such, but as a part of the system in a holistic way. And in the near future, we have to address embodied carbon as well as Francis Allard already explained how France is doing it. Next slide. The revision, well, it is one of the reasons of the revision is to make the energy certificate more popular and more reliable. And that will also be addressed in the presentations of tomorrow on the CERT program. We have a performance gap, so there is always discussion about the metered values compared with the calculated one. In the current Annex 1 proposal, it is also giving an opportunity to use metered value to verify the correctness of the calculated use, but also to use it as a value that you can give in additional on the energy certificate. Some countries do this already, but it is not done by all countries in Europe. And by referring to the Indoor Environmental Quality Standard 16798 in the annex of the EPD, there is an incentive to include indoor environmental quality performance indicators on the certificate. And by doing so, include also the energy use absent or underperforming building systems in the energy performance calculation. So you get some negative values when you don't perform. The expected EPD expresses this quite softly. Well, this is my opinion, and I hope it will stay in the last process of the discussion. In Article 6 on new buildings, it is addressed for existing buildings. It is mentioned indoor conditions, and in order to optimize health, indoor air quality, and comfort levels as defined by member states. So again, they give the space to the member states to really define the requirements. Next slide. Article 4 is unchanged, so it is still the fact that the EPD or the methodology refers to the EPB standards. In Annex 1, Article 2, the new EPD requires a calculation using hourly calculation step approach. I've seen in this ongoing discussion that the member states again wanted to add comma monthly, and this is I will explain later that this is quite stupid. And this hourly procedure is, as I see, more easy to use, more transparent, reproducible, innovation supportive. It is also expected that it will reduce the performance gap. And it is also referred to in relation to metered energy. And also the Annex 1 refers to the overarching standards, and they added 2 other standards, the Indoor Environmental Quality Standard and the standard on primary energy factors and CO2 emission. Next slide. Most important is the calculation, of course, of the energy needs, and that is reflected in the FISA 2016, published in 2017. It contains at this moment both monthly and hourly calculation methods. We kept hourly and monthly in it because several member states want to use it. I hope that will change. But what is essential that both methods, hourly or monthly, use the same set of input data for the user. So switching from monthly to hourly is actually quite simple. The tool, of course, the calculation tool has to handle it. But for the user, there is no difference. We also made in webinar 4 a presentation on this issue, so you can look at our website. The proposal to make hourly methods is a must make sense. We are no longer in the last century. We should do it. The next slide, I explain it a little more. To access interaction between on-site PV and the grid, you need that. For zero emission buildings, there is no room to disguise fossil energy use by averaging the energy produced and used over the months, or some even over the season or a year. To take in account the dynamic hourly interaction between system and energy needs, for example, heat pumps, but there are more examples. To assess the smart readiness indicator and to assess the thermal comfort in case of undersized or absent systems, or in case of ventilated cooling systems. Next slide. I will explain the picture later. In particular, relevant when it comes to renewable energy. The electricity balance in case of a monthly method is not working. The energy balance is averaged over a longer period, and the need for electricity from the grid during the evening is covered by surplus during the day, which is of course a theoretical approach. Next slide. Now, the daytime surplus does not cover nighttime shortage. It is only compensating in the calculation. It is a cover-up, disguises non-renewable energy use, so it leads to fake zero emission buildings. And yes, this could be quasi-solved in a monthly method with a correction factor for the phase difference between supply and demand. But such a factor gives only generic correction, and you will not see and does not reward the impact of an optimization of the energy balance between building and grid by using smart equipment, batteries, and other storage systems. The zero energy building is even more fake if the winter shortage of electricity is allowed to be compensated by summer surplus. The net annual calculation, as they call it. This concept might have been good enough for zero energy buildings, but not for the buildings towards zero carbon. Next slide. Here you see a little bit a picture how it works. If you do the calculation for this house with a heat pump, and you do it on basis of an hourly method, you will find that you still need in the nighttime and more energy from the grid, 9.8 kilowatt hours. If you use a monthly procedure, you will find that you only need 2 kilowatt hours from the grid. Well, I think it is quite obvious that this is not the way to go forward. And similarly, this is also the case for the thermal comfort calculations. Next slide. So the conclusion on hourly is clear for me. Real use of non-renewable energy, use instead of distinguished use of non-renewable due to the monthly or even annual averages is a fake carbon emissions. For assessing the smart readiness indicator and also the thermal comfort, and for awarding hourly sensitive systems like heat pumps, solar protections, and more systems we have in buildings that can be controlled and steered on an hourly basis. Next slide. On the smart readiness indicator in Article 13, it is said that the Commission shall adopt delegated acts regarding this smart readiness indicator. And the rating shall be based on an assessment of the capability of a building to adapt its operation to the needs of the occupants and the grid interaction. For that, of course, we need a better definition and a methodology. And the Commission says in the directive that they will develop it by December 25. Adopt a delegated act for rating the smart readiness indicator for non-residential buildings with an effective output of 290 kilowatt. So there it becomes requirement. Towards the improved reduction and greenhouse gas emission reduction in Article 2, it is said that we have to go to really zero carbon buildings where we can take in account that the little energy that the building still needs, that it has to be covered by renewables produced on site or nearby, or connected to district heating and cooling systems with a decarbonized energy supply. This is the proposal, and in Article 3 we say that for the purpose of expressing the energy performance of buildings, member states may define also additional numerical indicators like non-renewable and renewable primary energy use, operational greenhouse gas produced in kilograms CO2 equivalents per square meter per year, following also the standard and CO2 machine. So the near zero energy performance, or the NZ building of the current EPBD approach will be deleted and replaced by the zero emission building approach. And building occupation passports have to provide a tailored roadmap to zero emission buildings issued by accredited or certified, a little bit in discussion, experts that also has to follow to visit a building on site, and that will be a delegated act by 2023. And the sustainable mobility infrastructure is also mentioned, how to connect that to new buildings. On the definition of renewable energy sources, it is said that it includes also geothermal and ambient energy. Next slide. I mentioned before that deep renovation leading to zero emission buildings. There is a definition that deep is only 30% reduction. Some countries want to have more, but the idea behind this is that you don't, and that's lock-in effect, that you don't do just one measure, let's say that is very cost effective, but doesn't lead to 30%, with the danger that the next measure is too expensive. So that's the idea behind this. Definitions in the EPBD are for, let's say, for 95% according to what we already included in the overarching EPBD standards. And for new buildings, there are some requirements. All buildings should be zero emission by 2030. I've seen some comments from some member states that it should be later, but if we want to reach zero carbon in 2050, I don't see why. Public buildings should be earlier, in 27. Life cycle global warming potential has to be calculated and reported by 27 for a building bigger than 2,000 square meter and for all buildings by 2030. So you see that France is already ahead. I hope so. Not yet in the EPD draft, but I think it should be. The indoor environmental quality should be addressed on the certificate as well. That is softly addressed in the current draft, but not there yet. The next slide. Proposed the new EPD, the new energy class improvement for non-residential by 2027 from G to F, 2030 from F to E, residential from F to E by 2033. So that gives you a little bit of picture which renovation activities are on implied by this. No fossil fuel boilers anymore supported in governmental programs by 27. And the scales of the EPCs, the certificates, should be harmonized in Europe to make it possible to compare. But it seems only useful if we also agree to harmonize the assessment procedures as well. The performance of technical building systems shall be considered as installed and not on basis of eco-design product declarations. An example is, of course, to use the EN 116, that is the heat pump system standard, instead of the eco-design declaration on the COP or the CERT. Member states shall ensure that requirements they set for technical building systems reach at least the latest cost optimal levels. And regular maintenance and inspection systems by qualified personnel is mentioned also in the new directive. Next slide. In Article 11, it's said that member states shall require zero emission buildings to be equipped with measuring and control devices for monitoring and regulation of indoor air quality. That is, of course, interesting for our industry. In existing buildings, installation of such control devices shall be required when it is feasible. But for new buildings, it is required. Member states shall ensure that when the technical building system is installed, that the overall performance of the electric system, where relevant, is assessed. And the results should be documented and reported to the building owner. And important is also for the energy advisors and consultant, Article 14, where we say that the data you use to assess the energy performance of a building, and which is the basis for the calculation, should and shall be available, freely available for the building owner without additional cost. So nowadays, what you see in many countries that they make the energy certificate, but they don't give you the database that was the basis for assessing the certificate. Which means if you go to another company to do perhaps your renovation, he has to do the job again. And that is not very useful for the consumer. Next slide. Reducing greenhouse gas emission. Well, what can we do? Of course, you have the energy efficiency first principle, but you have to look at it a little bit more logic, because you have to balance in the cost between reducing the need by building-related measures and improving the system's efficiency by applying more efficient systems. So how to find the optimum is not per se clear in the beginning. So you really have to balance the different measures. Reducing the embodied carbon. Well, that's of course for new buildings and deeply renovated buildings. You can choose for carbon neutral building materials, but they are of course more expensive. And on heat pumps and air conditioners, we have to eliminate refrigerant releases, minimize leakage, and of course use low warming potential refrigerants. And on the design of the systems, we have to optimize the grid flexibility and integration. We have to look at storage systems, interactive control, real-time carbon data from the grid provider, and also applying the smart readiness functionalities. We have to look at on-site renewable production, and we have to look nationally on decarbonizing the electrical grid in general. Next slide. Will it impact the use of the standards? Well, if I read the EPBD, a more stringent policy regarding the certificates, their quality and acceptance will emphasize the correct use of the set of energy performance building standards. The EU harmonized greenhouse gas metric will make the use of the standard on primary energy factors and CO2 emission factors, the 17423, more prominent, and reducing the performance gap by improving the reliability of the calculation is supported by the required, I hope so, hourly calculation standard. And the hourly calculation standard brings, of course, also smart readiness indicator to a next stage. Next slide. How do we look at the current revision? Well, we have to revise anyhow because after 5 years, we published in 2017, we have to reconsider if the standards are still up to date according to the standard ISO rules. In my committee 70371, we consider in cooperation with the other 5 TCs and the 2 ICPCs for the 2007 family to coordinate this review process that is ongoing at this moment. And given the EPBD revision, we will take in the revision that will start after the publication of EPBD, this EPBD revised text as well. And apart from this EPBD issue, we already know that some standards need some update, editorial, but also technical, and updates may also need it to make standards better suited for software development, which is needed to make the standards more accessible. The next slide, I show you a little bit the process where we are. So you see the EPBD revision in 2020. Well, it will be published in the beginning of 2023, where the national implementation of EPBD will take at least 2 years, 1.5 years, depends a little bit. And we expect that in the beginning of 2023, we can start this revision process. For that process, of course, I will ask the Commission also support. And this systematic review is ongoing. At this moment, it should be finished by the beginning of December. And all the TCs have to prepare a plan with priorities on the revision of different standards. Then the EPBD standards will be revised in stages. In this process, we also look to a program in CEN and ISO on smart standards. So the standards are not this paper document, but also, you could say, machine readable and connected to calculation procedures. I think this is more what next slide will say that this is the end. Yeah, thank you. Any questions?
Okay, thank you very much.